The fist connects with Marcus Daniels's jaw before he even sees it coming. His surgical bag hits the concrete. Sterile instruments scatter across the oil-stained floor of the parking garage. A white man stands over him, veins bulging in his neck, screaming words that echo off the concrete pillars. "I said get out of here before I call the cops on your black ass." Marcus tastes blood. He doesn't fight back. He doesn't run. He simply looks up at the man who just assaulted him and says 5 words that will haunt Bradley Whitmore for the rest of his life. "I'll see you upstairs." 47 minutes later, Bradley Whitmore will be on his knees begging this same man to save his dying 8-year-old son. But that satisfying moment of karma, it's just the beginning. What Marcus uncovers next will expose a 30-year conspiracy that destroyed his own father, and he's about to burn the whole rotten system to the ground. Stay until the end and drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The punch came at 5:52 in the morning. Marcus Daniels had been awake since 4:30, the way he always was on surgery days. 12 years as Chief of Pediatric Surgery at St. Michael's Medical Center had trained his body better than any alarm clock. He rose in the darkness, made coffee with exactly 2 tablespoons of grounds, and stood at his kitchen window, watching the Houston skyline shift from black to gray. His daughter Amelia was still sleeping. 12 years old, the spitting image of her mother. Marcus checked on her before he left the way he did every morning, standing in her doorway for just a moment, watching her breathe. 6 years since Caroline died. 6 years of raising their daughter alone. 6 years of learning that love doesn't end when someone stops breathing, it just changes shape. He gathered his surgical bag, kissed his fingers, touched them to Caroline's photograph on the hallway table, and walked out the door. By 5:41, he was approaching the hospital. By 5:43, he discovered that the doctor's reserved parking lot was blocked by construction vehicles. Orange cones, yellow tape, a sign that read, "Whitmore Construction Authorized Personnel Only." Marcus circled once, twice. A foreman in a hard hat waved him away without looking up from his clipboard. "Reserved lots closed. Use the public garage." "I'm a surgeon. I have a 7 a.m. procedure." "Congratulations. Public garage is that way." Marcus didn't argue. He'd learned a long time ago which battles were worth fighting. He drove to the public garage, level 2, found a spot near the elevator, and sat for a moment with his hands on the wheel. The garage was quiet. A few cars scattered across the concrete. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in that sickly yellow glow that made even healthy people look like corpses. Marcus grabbed his surgical bag, $3,000 worth of specialized instruments he'd bought with his own money, and stepped out of his car. That's when he noticed the white pickup truck 3 spaces down. That's when he saw the couple inside watching him through the windshield. That's when the woman pointed and the man's door swung open. Bradley Whitmore was not having a good morning. His son Tyler was upstairs in the pediatric ICU, hooked up to machines that beeped and whirred and did things Bradley didn't understand. Rare heart defect, the doctors had said. Needs immediate surgery. Only one surgeon in the state qualified to perform it. Bradley had been awake for 36 hours. His eyes burned. His hands shook. His wife Vanessa sat beside him in the truck, clutching her designer purse like a life preserver, her face pale beneath carefully applied makeup that was starting to crack. They'd come down to the garage to get fresh clothes from the car. A simple errand. Something normal in a world that had stopped making sense the moment the ER doctor said the words, "Your son's heart is failing." And then Bradley saw him. A black man. Alone. Moving slowly through the garage at 5:50 in the morning, carrying a bag, checking his surroundings. Something inside Bradley, something ugly, something he'd carried his whole life without examining, snapped into place like a loaded gun. Vanessa looked at him. "What? That guy. He's casing cars." "Bradley, we should get back upstairs." "He's checking our truck. You see that?" He looked right at us. Bradley's hand was already on the door handle. 36 hours of fear and helplessness, and watching his son struggle to breathe it all needed somewhere to go. And here was a target. Here was something he could control. "I'll handle this," he said. He stepped out of the truck. Yeah. Marcus heard the footsteps before he saw the man. Heavy. Aggressive. The walk of someone who'd already decided how this encounter was going to end. He turned. The man was big. 6'2", maybe 220. Red face, thick neck, the kind of polo shirt that cost more than Marcus's first car. Behind him, a woman with ash blonde hair was climbing out of a white pickup phone already in her hand. "Hey! Hey, you!" Marcus stopped. "Can I help you?" "Yeah, you can help me by getting the hell out of this garage." "Excuse me." "You heard me." The man was closer now. Close enough that Marcus could smell the coffee on his breath. Could see the bloodshot eyes, could recognize the look of a man operating on no sleep and pure adrenaline. "This is hospital parking. Staff and patients. You don't belong here." Marcus felt the old familiar weight settle into his chest. The weight he'd carried since he was 7 years old, and a store clerk followed him through the aisles. The weight he'd refined at 22 when a medical school professor asked if he was there to clean. The weight that had calcified into armor by the time he became Chief of Pediatric Surgery, and colleagues still asked to see his ID. "I'm hospital staff," Marcus said, keeping his voice level. "I'm walking to the elevator." "Staff." The man laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. "In that jacket, at 6 in the morning, you think I'm stupid." "I don't think anything about you, sir. I'm just trying to get to work." The woman had caught up now. She stood 10 feet back, phone pressed to her ear, lips moving rapidly. "Bradley, I'm calling 911. "Good. Tell them we've got a trespasser." Marcus shifted his surgical bag to his other shoulder. "I'm not trespassing. I'm a physician. I have a surgery scheduled in just over an hour." "A physician." Bradley repeated the word like Marcus had claimed to be an astronaut. "Show me your ID." "I'm under no legal obligation to present identification in a public parking structure." See, that's exactly what someone who doesn't belong here would say. Marcus could hear Vanessa on the phone now. Her voice pitched high with performed fear. "Yes, there's a black man in the hospital parking garage. He's acting suspicious. He won't leave. My husband is trying to get him to leave, but he's being aggressive." Aggressive. Marcus was standing still, speaking calmly, holding a surgical bag, and he was being described as aggressive. He reached into his pocket, slowly, carefully. Bradley lunged forward. "What are you doing? Get your hands where I can see them." "I'm getting my phone. I'm going to record this interaction." "Like hell you are." Bradley's hand shot out. His fingers closed around Marcus's wrist, twisted, squeezed. The phone clattered to the concrete. "I said." Bradley hissed, his face inches from Marcus's, "Get out of my garage." Marcus looked at him, looked at the hand on his wrist, looked at the woman still talking to 911, describing him as a threat. "Let go of me," he said quietly. "Or what? Let go of me or I'll file assault charges." Bradley laughed again. That same ugly sound. "You think anyone's going to believe you over me, over my wife? You think the cops are going to take your side?" He was probably right. Marcus knew the statistics, knew how these encounters usually ended, knew that his word against a wealthy white couple's was a bet he'd lose 9 times out of 10. But Marcus Daniels had spent his entire life being told what he couldn't do, and he was tired. "I'm going to ask you one more time," he said. "Let go of my arm." Bradley's response was to shove him. The push was hard, harder than it needed to be. Marcus's back hit the concrete pillar behind him, and his head snapped back, connecting with the rough surface with a sound like a book being slammed shut. His surgical bag fell. The zipper split. Instruments scattered across the garage floor. Retractors, forceps, specialized tools he'd spent years learning to use, now rolling across oil stains and cigarette butts. Marcus didn't fall. He caught himself against the pillar, one hand pressed flat against the concrete, the other raised in a gesture of non-resistance. Blood trickled from the back of his head. Bradley stood over him, breathing hard, fists clenched. "Now, are you going to leave, or do I need to help you?" Vanessa watched from 10 feet away, phone still pressed to her ear. The 911 dispatcher was asking questions she didn't know how to answer. "Ma'am, is the individual armed? Is he threatening you?" He was reaching for something. My husband had to restrain him." "Has your husband been injured?" "No, but this man is clearly disturbed. He won't leave. Please send someone." She watched Bradley standing over the man, chest heaving. Watched the man slowly straighten up, touching the back of his head, looking at the blood on his fingers. Something about the way he moved bothered her. Something controlled, deliberate. The way he looked at Bradley wasn't the look of a cornered criminal. It was the look of someone taking notes. Ma'am, are you still there?" Yes, I'm here." "Officers are being dispatched. Please stay on the line." The man bent down and began picking up his scattered instruments. Carefully, methodically, one by one. He examined each one, wiped it on his jacket, placed it back in the bag. "What are you doing?" Bradley demanded. "What is that stuff?" The man didn't answer. "I asked you a question." "These are surgical instruments." The man's voice was calm. Too calm. "They were sterilized. They're contaminated now. They'll need to be re-sterilized before I can use them." "Surgical instruments." Bradley's laugh was uncertain now. "What, you stole those from somewhere?" The man finished collecting his things. He stood up, brushed off his jacket, and looked Bradley directly in the eyes. "My name is Dr. Marcus Daniels. I'm Chief of Pediatric Surgery at this hospital. I have an operation scheduled at 7 a.m. He pulled a hospital ID from his jacket pocket, the thing he'd been reaching for before Bradley grabbed him and held it up. "I've been trying to get to that elevator for the past 4 minutes. You've assaulted me, contaminated my surgical equipment, and had your wife file a false police report." Bradley's face went white. You're a doctor." "I'm the doctor." Marcus tucked the ID back in his pocket. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go save a child's life. I hope for your sake it's not someone you know." He walked past Bradley without another word. His footsteps echoed in the silent garage. The elevator doors opened. He stepped inside, turned, looked at them both. "I'll see you upstairs," he said. The doors closed. Vanessa lowered the phone from her ear. Her hand was shaking. "Bradley, did he say Chief of Surgery? He's lying. He has to be lying." The ID looked real. Anyone can fake an ID. He probably stole Bradley. Vanessa's voice cracked. "Tyler's surgery. The specialist they called in. What was his name?" Bradley opened his mouth, closed it. His face, already pale, went the color of old paper. "Oh God," he whispered. "Oh my God." Marcus took the elevator to the 4th floor and walked directly to the nearest restroom. He locked himself in a stall, sat down on the toilet lid, and let his hands shake. They always shook afterward. Not during. During he was ice, he was stone, he was whatever he needed to be to survive. But afterward alone, the adrenaline had nowhere to go. He examined his injuries in the mirror. The back of his head was tender, the hair matted with blood, but the wound was superficial. It would need cleaning, maybe a bandage, but no stitches. The bruise on his wrist was already darkening 4 distinct finger marks where Bradley had grabbed him. He took photos. The head wound. The wrist. His face still calm, still composed. Still the face of a man who had learned to swallow his rage because showing it would only make things worse. Then he washed his hands, put on his white coat, clipped his ID to his lapel where everyone could see it, and walked to the pediatric ICU. Dr. Keisha Monroe was waiting for him at the nurse's station. She was in her mid-30s, sharp-eyed, the kind of ER physician who could diagnose a collapsed lung from 20 feet away. "You're late," she said. Then she looked closer. Marcus, what happened to you? Nothing that matters right now. What's the status on my 7 a.m.? Stable but deteriorating. The defect's worse than the initial scans showed. You're looking at a 6 to 8 hour procedure minimum. She paused. Marcus, there's blood in your hair. I know. Someone hit you. I'm handling it. Keisha's jaw tightened. She knew better than to push. The patient's parents are in the family waiting room. They've been here all night. Absolute wrecks. Names. Whitmore. Bradley and Vanessa Whitmore. Their son's name is Tyler, 8 years old. Marcus went very still. Say that again. Bradley and Vanessa Whitmore. Why do you know them? He didn't answer. He stood there for a long moment, staring at something Keisha couldn't see. Then he laughed. It was a strange sound. Not bitter, not angry, just surprised. The laugh of a man who had just discovered that the universe had a sense of humor after all. Marcus. Prep the OR, he said. I need to have a conversation with the parents first. Are you okay? He looked at her. Really looked at her. And Keisha saw something in his eyes she'd never seen before. Something hard and bright and dangerous. I'm about to find out, he said. The family waiting room was small, windowless, designed to feel intimate, but only managing to feel claustrophobic. 2 chairs, a couch, a table with outdated magazines. A television mounted on the wall playing news on mute. Bradley and Vanessa Whitmore sat side by side on the couch. Their hands were clasped together. Their faces were gray. They looked like people who had aged 10 years in 2 days. Marcus stood in the doorway watching them for a moment before they noticed him. It was Vanessa who looked up first. Her eyes found his face. Then his white coat. Then the name embroidered on it in blue thread. Dr. Marcus Daniels, Chief of Pediatric Surgery. The sound she made was somewhere between a gasp and a sob. Bradley's head snapped up. His eyes went wide. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Marcus walked into the room. He closed the door behind him. The click of the latch was very loud in the silence. Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, he said. I'm Dr. Marcus Daniels. I'll be performing your son's surgery this morning. Bradley stood up. His legs were unsteady. Doctor, I listen about what happened in the garage. Sit down, Mr. Whitmore. I didn't know. I said sit down. Bradley sat. Marcus pulled a chair across the room and positioned it directly in front of them. He sat down, placed his hands on his knees, and looked at them the way he looked at patients' families when he had bad news to deliver. Your son has a rare cardiac defect, he said. Without surgery, he has approximately 4 hours before his heart fails completely. The procedure is complex, high risk, and requires a level of specialization that only 2 surgeons in this country possess. I am one of them. The other is in Seattle and cannot get here in time. He paused, letting that sink in. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Vanessa was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. Please, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean... Mrs. Whitmore, I need you to focus. I'm not asking for an apology. I'm asking if you understand your son's situation. She nodded, unable to speak. Good. Marcus leaned back in his chair. Now, here's what's going to happen. In approximately 45 minutes, I'm going to walk into an operating room and spend the next 6 to 8 hours doing everything in my power to save your child's life. I'm going to do this not because you deserve it, not because you've earned it, but because I took an oath. Because your son is 8 years old and innocent of his parents' sins. Because that's who I am. Bradley's voice was a whisper. Thank you. Thank you, I'm not finished. Bradley fell silent. When this surgery is over, win or lose, I'm going to file a police report. I'm going to press charges for assault and battery. I'm going to submit a formal complaint about the false 911 call your wife made. I have photos of my injuries. I have the dispatch recording. I have security footage from the garage that will show exactly what happened. He stood up. Your son's life is in my hands. That's the medical reality. But my response to what you did in that garage, that's separate. That's justice. And I promise you, Mr. Whitmore, I always keep my promises." He walked to the door, stopped and looked back over his shoulder. "A nurse will be in shortly with consent forms. Sign them or don't. The choice is yours." He left the room. Behind him in the silence, Bradley Whitmore put his face in his hands and began to cry. Time. The surgery took 7 hours and 43 minutes. Marcus didn't think about the garage. Didn't think about Bradley's hands on his wrist, the impact of his skull against the pillar, the blood in his hair. When he was in the operating room, there was no room for anything except the patient on the table. An 8-year-old boy named Tyler, whose heart was broken in a way that only Marcus could fix. He worked steadily, methodically, his hands as sure as they'd been since his first year of residency. The defect was worse than anticipated. The imaging had missed a secondary complication, a narrowing of the pulmonary artery that required an additional graft. Every time he thought he'd found the end of the problem, there was another layer beneath it. At the 4-hour mark, the anesthesiologist caught his eye. "You need a break." "No." "Marcus, you've been on your feet since—" "I said no." At the 6-hour mark, Tyler's heart stopped. The monitors screamed. The team moved in coordinated chaos. Paddles charged and discharged. Drugs pushed. CPR initiated. Marcus didn't panic. He never panicked. He placed his hands on the small chest and felt for the rhythm. Felt for the life that was trying to slip away. "Come on, Tyler," he murmured, too quiet for anyone else to hear. "Come on, stay with me." 30 seconds of compressions. Check rhythm. Nothing. 60 seconds. Check rhythm. Weak flutter. 90 seconds. Check rhythm. Steady beat. The team exhaled as one. The monitors settled into their reassuring beeps. Marcus continued the repair. At the 7-hour mark, he closed the final suture. Checked his work. Checked it again. "We're done," he said. "Let's close him up." 30 minutes later, Tyler Whitmore was in recovery stable, his repaired heart beating strong and steady in his small chest. Marcus stripped off his surgical gown, washed his hands, and walked out of the OR. Keisha was waiting for him. "He's going to make it," she said. It wasn't a question. "He's going to make it." "And you?" Marcus looked at her. The exhaustion was catching up with him now, 7 hours of precision work on top of no sleep, on top of being assaulted in a parking garage. His head throbbed where it had hit the pillar. His wrist ached where Bradley had grabbed him. "I need to make some phone calls," he said. "The parents are in the waiting room. They've been there all day. They haven't eaten, haven't slept. Every time a nurse walked by, they looked up like they expected the worst." Marcus nodded slowly. "I'll talk to them, but first—" He pulled out his phone. "I need to file a police report. And I need to find out who authorized that construction crew to block the doctor's parking lot." "You're really going through with it?" "Pressing charges. Keisha, he hit me. He grabbed me in that garage and threw me against a wall because I'm black, and he assumed I didn't belong. His wife called 911 and described me as aggressive and suspicious because I wouldn't show my ID. None of that changes because I saved his son." "I know. I'm just saying it's going to be ugly. The hospital's not going to like it. There'll be media lawyers, all kinds of pressure to make it go away quietly." Marcus looked at her for a long moment. "My father was a janitor at this hospital," he said. 28 years ago, he witnessed a doctor falsifying a patient's cause of death. He reported it. A week later, he was fired. No explanation, no hearing, just gone. He died 2 years after that. Heart attack. He was 54 years old. Keisha's expression shifted. "Marcus, I didn't know. The doctor my father reported, he's still here. He's been here for 30 years, climbing the ladder, protecting himself and everyone like him. And you know what? I'm tired of pretending I don't see it. I'm tired of keeping my head down and being grateful for the opportunity to be in the room." He straightened his white coat. "I'm going to file that report. And then I'm going to find out exactly who's been protecting people like Bradley Whitmore and the doctor who destroyed my father. And if this hospital doesn't like it..." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Keisha watched him walk away, and she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Dangerous, fragile hope. Because maybe, just maybe, someone was finally going to crack the foundation. The Whitmores were exactly where Keisha said they'd be. Same couch, same clasped hands, same gray faces. But when Marcus walked in, they both stood up. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. Bradley's eyes were red-rimmed, his face a mask of fear and hope and shame. "Doctor." Bradley's voice broke on the word. "Is he?" "Tyler is in recovery. The surgery was successful. His heart is functioning normally. Barring complications, he should make a full recovery." Vanessa collapsed back onto the couch, sobbing with relief. Bradley swayed on his feet, then steadied himself against the arm of the sofa. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you, doctor. I don't know I can't even..." "There's nothing to thank me for, Mr. Whitmore. I did my job. But after what you did in that garage has no bearing on my obligations to your son. He's an innocent child. He deserved the best care I could provide. That's what he got." Marcus pulled out a business card and held it out. Bradley took it, confusion crossing his face. "That's the contact information for my attorney," Marcus said. "You'll be hearing from her within the next 48 hours regarding the assault charges. I suggest you retain counsel." The color drained from Bradley's face. "Doctor, please. I wasn't thinking. I was scared I hadn't slept. My son was dying." "Your son was dying and you still found time to attack a stranger in a parking garage because of the color of his skin." Marcus's voice was steady, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "Those aren't mitigating circumstances, Mr. Whitmore. They're character revelations." He turned to leave, then stopped. "One more thing. The construction that blocked the doctor's parking lot this morning is that your company, Whitmore Construction." Bradley nodded weakly. "Who authorized the schedule change? The original permits had work beginning next week." I'd have to check with my foreman." "Check. And ask him who from the hospital called to move up the timeline." Marcus paused at the door. "I'll be very interested in the answer." He walked out, leaving them alone with their relief and their dread. Behind him, Bradley Whitmore looked down at the business card in his hand and realized that his nightmare wasn't over. It was just beginning. That night, Marcus sat in his home office, his daughter asleep down the hall. The house quiet, except for the ticking of his father's old clock. On his desk, printed copies of his photographs. The bruise on his wrist. The wound on his head. His own face looking back at him with an expression he barely recognized. Next to the photographs, a folder he'd pulled from his filing cabinet. Faded, yellowed, 28 years old. His father's termination letter. Marcus hadn't looked at it in years. Hadn't allowed himself to. But tonight, after everything that had happened, he needed to remember why he was fighting. The letter was brief, bureaucratic, devoid of humanity. Terminated, effective immediately. Failure to meet performance standards. No severance or benefits. No mention of the report his father had filed. No mention of the patient whose death had been covered up. No mention of the doctor who had retaliated. But Marcus knew. His father had told him everything before he died, had pressed the folder into Marcus's hands and said, "They'll try to make you forget. Don't let them." Marcus hadn't forgotten. And now, 28 years later, he was Chief of Pediatric Surgery at the same hospital that had destroyed his father. He had power, he had position, he had standing, and he had a question that had been waiting 3 decades for an answer. Who had protected the doctor who had silenced James Daniels? His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. He opened it. One line of text. "Ask about basement storage room B12. Your father's file is still there. They kept everything." Marcus stared at the message. Someone was watching, someone who knew, someone who wanted him to find the truth. He put down the phone, looked at his father's photograph on the wall, and made a decision. Tomorrow he would file his police report. Tomorrow he would press charges against Bradley Whitmore. But that was just the beginning. The real investigation, the one that would expose 30 years of cover-ups, silenced witnesses, and institutional rot, that would start with a locked room in the basement and a folder with his father's name on it. Marcus Daniels had spent his whole life being told what he couldn't do. Being told to keep his head down, to be grateful, to not make waves. Those days were over. He picked up his phone and typed a reply to the unknown number. "Who are you?" 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Finally a response. "A friend, keep pushing. The cracks are starting to show." Marcus set the phone down and sat back in his chair. Somewhere in Houston, a wealthy contractor was realizing that money couldn't buy his way out of consequences. Somewhere in St. Michael's Medical Center, secrets that had been buried for 30 years were about to surface. And somewhere hidden in the shadows, allies he'd never known he had were waiting for him to make the next move. The system had protected itself for 3 decades. But Marcus Daniels was just getting started. The morning after Tyler Whitmore's surgery, Marcus arrived at the hospital before dawn. He hadn't slept. The anonymous text message kept running through his mind like a song he couldn't shake. "Room B12. Your father's file is still there. They kept everything." He parked in the public garage again. The doctor's lot was still blocked by Whitmore construction vehicles, though now that detail felt less like coincidence and more like design. He walked past the spot where Bradley had shoved him, paused for just a moment to look at the concrete pillar, then continued to the elevator. His first stop wasn't the surgical floor. It was human resources. The HR director was a woman named Stephanie Cole, mid-50s, with the practiced smile of someone who had learned to deliver bad news without flinching. Marcus had dealt with her a few times over the years, hiring decisions, performance reviews, the occasional personnel dispute. She'd always been efficient, professional, careful. "Dr. Daniels." She rose from her desk when he entered. "I wasn't expecting you. Is everything all right?" "I need to file a formal complaint." Her smile flickered. "What kind of complaint?" "Assault. Yesterday morning in the parking garage, a visitor attacked me." Stephanie's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, concern, and something else. Something that looked almost like fear. "I see. That's very serious. Have you contacted the police?" "I filed a report last night, but I also want this documented internally. The individual who assaulted me was a patient's family member. His wife made a false 911 call describing me as a suspicious person. Security was involved." Security. A guard named Roy Hendricks responded to the scene. He dismissed my account without taking a statement and canceled the police dispatch. Stephanie sat down slowly. Her hands were flat on the desk, very still. "Dr. Daniels, I want to help you. But this is a complex situation. If a patient's family member is involved, there are liability concerns, privacy considerations. I was assaulted on hospital property while reporting to work. What's complex about that? Nothing at all." She reached for a form, but her movements were hesitant. "I'll need you to fill this out. Document everything: times, locations, names, witnesses. The complaint will be reviewed by our Internal Affairs Committee." "How long does that take?" "Typically 30 to 60 days. 60 days. Dr. Daniels, I understand your frustration, but there are procedures." "Procedures." Marcus leaned forward. "Ms. Cole, let me ask you something. How many complaints has this hospital received about Roy Hendricks?" Her hands stopped moving. "I'm not sure what you mean." "I mean exactly what I said. How many people have filed complaints about that security guard? How many were dismissed? How many were marked, resolved, no action required?" Stephanie's face had gone very pale. "Personnel records are confidential. I can't discuss." "You can't or you won't." Silence. Marcus stood up. I'll fill out your form. I'll follow your procedures. But I want you to understand something, Ms. Cole. I'm not going to let this disappear. Whatever's been buried in this hospital, whatever's been covered up, I'm going to find it." He walked out, leaving the form on her desk. Behind him, Stephanie Cole reached for her phone with trembling hands. The call connected on the second ring. "Dr. Thornton, we have a problem." 3 hours later, Marcus was in his office reviewing post-op notes when Keisha Monroe appeared in his doorway. "You need to see this." She was holding a manila folder unmarked, clearly not from any official hospital system. "What is it?" "I don't know. It was in my locker when I came in this morning. No note, no explanation." She handed it to him. "But I think someone wants you to have it." Marcus opened the folder. Inside were photocopies of personnel records. 7 of them, all from the past 5 years. All from the hospital's complaint database. Each one documented an incident involving security officer Roy Hendricks. Each one involved a black employee or visitor. Each one had been marked "Resolved no further action." The complaints were remarkably similar. A black nurse questioned aggressively at the staff entrance. A black physician's assistant asked to show ID 3 times in 1 week. A black family member of a patient blocked from entering a waiting room. A black vendor accused of stealing from the cafeteria. 7 complaints, 7 dismissals. 7 people whose experiences had been filed away and forgotten. "Where did you get this?" Marcus asked quietly. "I told you, it was in my locker." "Do you know who put it there?" Keisha hesitated. "No, but Marcus, look at the 3rd one." He flipped to the 3rd complaint. "Read the name at the top, Dr. Keisha Monroe, date March 15, 2022. He looked up at her. "You filed a complaint against Hendricks. 3 years ago. He stopped me at the emergency entrance at 2 in the morning. I was responding to a trauma call. He demanded 3 forms of ID, made me open my medical bag, accused me of looking lost. I was wearing scrubs and a hospital badge. He told me I didn't look like a doctor." "What happened?" "I filed a complaint. 2 weeks later I was transferred to night shifts. The official reason was departmental restructuring. But I knew. Everyone knew." Marcus looked at the folder in his hands. 7 complaints. 7 women and men who had been humiliated, dismissed, punished for speaking up. "Who would have access to these files?" he asked. "HR administration. Maybe someone in the legal department." "So whoever sent this has access to confidential personnel records?" "Yes." "And they're risking their job to share them with us?" "Yes." Marcus closed the folder. "Why now? Why me?" Keisha sat down in the chair across from his desk. "Because you're not going to let it go. Everyone who filed a complaint before, we all let it go eventually. The pressure was too much, the system too strong. But you..." She paused. "You saved Bradley Whitmore's son, then told him you were pressing charges anyway. That story is all over the hospital. People are talking. What are they saying? That you're either very brave or very stupid." She smiled slightly. "Some of us think you might be both." "And you..." "What do you think?" Keisha was quiet for a moment. "I think you're the first person in a long time who's actually willing to fight. And I think whoever sent that folder is counting on it." Marcus looked at the documents again. 7 complaints, 7 cover-ups, 1 security guard who'd been operating with impunity for years. But there was something else nagging at him. Something from the anonymous text message. "Keisha, do you know anything about a storage room in the basement room B12? Her expression shifted. "How do you know about that?" "Someone told me." "Why? What's down there?" "I don't know exactly, but there are rumors. Old files, archived records, things that were supposed to be destroyed but never were." She lowered her voice. "People say that's where they keep the things they don't want found." "Like what?" "Like evidence. Documentation of complaints that went beyond simple dismissal. cases where people tried to fight back and lost. Marcus thought about his father, about the termination letter in his filing cabinet, about the 28 years of silence. "I need to get into that room," he said. "It's restricted. You'd need authorization from building maintenance, and they report directly to administration." "Then I'll find another way." Keisha studied him for a long moment. "Marcus, whatever you're digging into, be careful. The people who run this hospital have been protecting themselves for a long time. They're not going to let you expose them without a fight." "Good," Marcus said, "because I'm not going to stop until I know the truth." The call from the hospital's chief administrator came that afternoon. Marcus was between patient consultations when his phone buzzed. The screen showed an internal extension he recognized immediately. "Dr. Daniels, this is Dr. Gerald Thornton. I'd like to see you in my office at your earliest convenience." "I have patients scheduled until 4. "This is rather urgent, Marcus." The use of his first name was deliberate, a power play dressed up as familiarity. "I'm sure you can rearrange." "I'll be there at 4:15. He hung up before Thornton could respond. Gerald Thornton's office was on the top floor of the administration building, a corner suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the medical campus. The furniture was expensive, the artwork tasteful, the overall effect one of carefully cultivated authority. Thornton himself was 62, silver-haired, with the kind of handsome face that photographed well at fundraising galas. He'd been chief administrator for 15 years, overseeing the hospital's expansion from a regional facility to one of the largest medical centers in Texas. He was also, according to what Marcus's father had told him before he died, the doctor who had falsified a patient's cause of death in 1997. The doctor James Daniels had reported. The doctor who had destroyed Marcus's father's life. "Marcus." Thornton rose from behind his desk, extending a hand. "Thank you for coming." Marcus shook the hand briefly. "You said it was urgent." "Please sit." Thornton gestured to a leather chair, then settled back into his own seat. "I understand there was an incident yesterday, in the parking garage." "That's correct. A patient's family member, Bradley Whitmore, I believe, became aggressive with you. There was a physical altercation. He assaulted me. His wife filed a false police report." Thornton nodded slowly, his expression one of practiced concern. "That must have been very distressing. I want you to know that this hospital takes such matters extremely seriously." "Do you—" A flicker of something crossed Thornton's face. Annoyance, maybe, or recognition that this conversation wasn't going the way he'd planned. "Marcus, I've known you for 12 years. I've watched you build an exceptional career here. You're one of the finest surgeons in the country. Your reputation brings patients to this hospital from all over the world." He paused. "I don't want to see that reputation damaged." "My reputation?" "These situations can be complicated. Media attention, legal proceedings, public scrutiny. It can all become very messy very quickly. And often the people who suffer most are the ones who press the matter in the first place." Marcus felt the cold weight in his chest grow heavier. "Are you advising me to drop the charges?" "I'm advising you to consider your options carefully." Thornton leaned forward. "The Whitmores are prepared to make this go away quietly. A substantial donation to the hospital foundation, a private apology, compensation for any medical expenses you incurred. Everyone moves on. No publicity, no controversy, no damage to anyone's career." Their son was dying, and Bradley Whitmore still found time to attack me because of the color of my skin. You think a donation makes that okay? I think a donation helps more people than a lawsuit. And what about Roy Hendricks, the security guard who dismissed my complaint and canceled the police dispatch? Thornton's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went very still. What about him? I've learned that he has a history of similar incidents. At least 7 complaints from black employees and visitors over the past 5 years, all dismissed, all buried. I'm not aware of any pattern of complaints against Officer Hendricks. No. Then you should check your HR files more carefully. Silence stretched between them. Marcus. Thornton's voice had lost its warmth. I'm trying to help you here. I'm offering you a way out of a situation that could become very ugly very fast. Take the settlement. Move on with your life. Continue doing the work you're so gifted at. And if I don't, then I can't protect you from what comes next. Marcus stood up. Doctor, Thornton, let me be clear about something. I don't need your protection. I never asked for it. And I'm not going to accept a payoff to keep quiet about being assaulted in my own workplace. He walked to the door, then stopped. One more thing. I know about room B12. I know what's stored down there. And I know that whatever this hospital has been hiding for the past 30 years is about to come to light. Thornton's face went very pale. I don't know what you're talking about. Yes, you do. Marcus opened the door. You've known since 1997. Since you falsified that death certificate and my father tried to report you. Since you had him fired and destroyed his life. The color drained from Thornton's face completely. Your father. James Daniels. Janitor. 26 years of service. Terminated without cause 1 week after he filed a report about you. Marcus's voice was steady, but his hands were shaking. He told me everything before he died. He told me to remember. And Dr. Thornton, I remember. He walked out, leaving the door open behind him. The office was silent for a long moment. Then Gerald Thornton reached for his phone. The call connected immediately. It's me. We have a problem. James Daniels' son knows. He knows everything. A pause. No. No, I don't think he's going to be reasonable. Another pause. Yes. Whatever it takes. The second anonymous delivery arrived that evening. Marcus found it on his doorstep when he got home, a plain manila envelope with no return address. Inside were 3 items. The first was a photograph, old and slightly faded, showing 2 men shaking hands at some kind of formal event. A banner in the background read, Houston Medical Association Annual Gala 1996. One of the men was Gerald Thornton, 30 years younger, dark-haired, already wearing the confident smile of a man on his way up. The other man was Roy Hendricks, not in a security uniform, in a suit and tie, standing as an equal, not a subordinate. The second item was a memo dated March 1997, 1 month before Marcus's father was fired. It was addressed to Hospital Personnel Committee and signed by Gerald Thornton. The subject line read, Re-employee complaint, James Daniels Custodial Services. The memo was brief. After thorough review, the allegations made by Mr. Daniels have been determined to be without merit. His continued employment poses a liability risk to the institution. Recommend immediate termination with prejudice. This matter should be considered closed. The third item was a handwritten note on plain paper. There's more, much more. Room B12 contains 30 years of files just like these. Thornton has been protecting himself and his associates since the beginning. Hendricks was never just a security guard, he was Thornton's fixer. The construction schedule change that blocked the doctor's lot yesterday, Thornton authorized it personally. He wanted you in the public garage. He wanted an incident. Ask yourself, why would the chief administrator care where one surgeon parks his car? You're getting close. Don't stop. A friend. Marcus read the note 3 times. Then he sat down at his kitchen table and tried to understand what he was seeing. Thornton and Hendricks had known each other since the 1990s, not as administrator and security guard, but as something else. Colleagues. Conspirators. Thornton had personally arranged for the doctor's parking lot to be blocked, had ensured that Marcus would park in the public garage on the same morning that Bradley Whitmore, a contractor whose company had been doing work for the hospital for years, would be there with his sick son. It couldn't be coincidence. It was too precise, too deliberate. But that raised an impossible question. Had Thornton somehow known that the Whitmores would confront Marcus? Had he planned it? Or was there something else going on? Something even darker? His phone buzzed. A text from a number he recognized now. Did you get the envelope? Marcus typed back. Yes. Who are you? Someone who's been waiting a long time for someone like you. Why me? Because you have power, position, standing. Because you won't let them buy your silence. Because you're James Daniels' son. Marcus's hands went cold. You knew my father. I knew what they did to him. I tried to help. I failed. I've been collecting evidence ever since, waiting for the right person. You're the right person. How can I trust you? A long pause. Then, check your father's old employee file, in room B12, box 1997J. There's a letter inside that I wrote 28 years ago, a letter no one ever read. What does it say? That your father was telling the truth, that Thornton falsified records, that 3 other employees witnessed it and were all terminated within 6 months. That the patient who died, the one whose death certificate was falsified, was the mother of a nurse who tried to file a complaint and was committed to a psychiatric facility before she could testify. Marcus stared at the phone screen. Committed? They said she had a breakdown, paranoid delusions. She spent 2 years in institutional care. By the time she got out, all the evidence was gone. Her mother was cremated. The records were sealed. Everyone who could have corroborated her story had been silenced or discredited. Is she still alive? Yes. Her name is Eleanor Hayes. She's 67 years old. She works in medical records. She's been working in medical records for 30 years, hiding in plain sight, collecting evidence, waiting. Waiting for what? For someone who could do what she couldn't. Someone they couldn't dismiss as crazy. Someone with credentials and standing and a platform. Marcus closed his eyes. She's the one who's been sending the documents, not you. We've been working together. She gathers, I deliver. We've been building this case for years, Dr. Daniels, waiting for the right moment, the right person. And the assault in the garage, that was the moment. Yes, when you walked out of that operating room and told Bradley Whitmore you were pressing charges anyway, that's when we knew. You're not going to stop. You're not going to be bought. You're going to see this through. Marcus opened his eyes. What do you need me to do? Get into room B12. Find your father's file. Find the evidence Eleanor's been collecting. Then make it public. Make it impossible to ignore. Make them answer for what they've done. And if they try to stop me, they will try. They'll threaten your job, your reputation, your family. They'll offer you money, power, anything to make you go away. And when that doesn't work, they'll try to destroy you the way they destroyed your father. Then I'll need to be ready. Yes, you will. Marcus set down the phone. Through the window, he could see his daughter's light still on. Amelia was doing homework, probably. Or texting friends. Living her normal 12-year-old life, unaware that her father was about to go to war. He thought about Caroline, about what she would say if she were here. She'd been a fighter too, right up until the end. She'd made him promise to raise Amelia to be strong, to be brave, to never accept injustice, just because fighting seemed too hard. He'd kept that promise. Now he was going to keep another one, the promise he'd made to himself the night his father died. The promise to remember. The promise to never let the truth disappear. Marcus picked up his phone and dialed Keisha's number. It's me. I need your help with something. What is it? I need to get into room B12, tonight. Whoa, silence on the line. Marcus, that's restricted access. If you're caught, I know the risks. Are you in or not? Another pause. Then, I'm in. What time? Midnight. Meet me at the service entrance. I'll be there. He hung up. Outside, the Houston skyline glittered against the dark sky. Somewhere in that maze of lights, Gerald Thornton was making phone calls, pulling strings, preparing to protect secrets that had been buried for 3 decades. But secrets had a way of surfacing, and Marcus Daniels was about to dig them up. At 11:47 p.m., Marcus parked his car 3 blocks from the hospital. He walked the rest of the way, keeping to the shadows, avoiding the main entrance and the security cameras he knew were positioned there. Keisha was waiting at the service entrance, wearing dark clothes and a nervous expression. "This is crazy," she said. "You know that, right?" "I know. If we're caught, we lose everything. Our careers, our licenses." "I know. So why are you doing this?" Marcus looked at her. "Because my father died thinking the truth didn't matter. I'm going to prove him wrong." Keisha held his gaze for a long moment. "Okay," she said. "Let's go prove him wrong." She produced a keycard borrowed, she said, from a friend in maintenance who owed her a favor, and swiped it against the reader. The door clicked open. They moved through the service corridor past the loading dock and the storage areas down a stairwell that led to the basement level. The lights were dim, the air cold and stale. Room B12 was at the end of a long hallway past rows of locked doors and forgotten equipment. A sign on the door read, "Authorized personnel only." Marcus tried the handle. Locked. "Now what?" Keisha whispered. He pulled out a key, the one Eleanor Hayes had left in his mailbox that afternoon, with a note that said simply, "For James." The key fit perfectly. The door swung open. Inside was a room filled with filing cabinets, dozens of them stretching back into shadows. Marcus flicked on his flashlight and began scanning the labels. 1997. He found the box labeled 1997J and pulled it down from the shelf. Inside were folders, each one tagged with an employee name. He flipped through them until he found it. Daniels James. Custodial Services. Terminated 04/15/1997. His father's file. Marcus opened it with hands that trembled despite his best efforts. Inside were documents he'd never seen. Performance reviews, all excellent. Commendations. A letter of appreciation signed by patients' families. And then, at the back, the termination paperwork. Attached to the termination paperwork was another document. A handwritten letter dated April 10, 1997, 5 days before his father was fired. The handwriting was neat, precise, female. "To whom it may concern. I am writing to document my first-hand knowledge of events at St. Michael's Medical Center on March 3, 1997. On that date, I witnessed Dr. Gerald Thornton alter medical records pertaining to patient Margaret Hayes, who died under suspicious circumstances. I believe her death was caused by medical negligence, and that Dr. Thornton falsified the death certificate to conceal this fact. I have shared this information with 3 colleagues, James Daniels Custodial, Robert Chen Nursing, and Maria Santos Records. All of us are prepared to testify to what we witnessed. I am aware that coming forward carries significant risk, but I cannot in good conscience remain silent while a patient's death is covered up and her family is denied justice. My name is Eleanor Hayes. Margaret Hayes was my mother. I am requesting a formal investigation by the Hospital Ethics Committee and, if warranted, referral to state medical licensing authorities. Signed, Eleanor Hayes, RN. Marcus stared at the letter. Eleanor Hayes, the nurse who had been committed to a psychiatric facility. The woman who had spent 2 years of her life locked away because she tried to tell the truth. The woman who was still here, still working at this hospital, still waiting. He looked at the date on the letter. April 10, 1997. 5 days later, his father was fired. 6 months later, Eleanor was in a psychiatric ward, and Gerald Thornton went on to become chief administrator. "Marcus," Keisha's voice was urgent. "Someone's coming." He could hear it now, footsteps in the corridor getting closer. "We need to go." "Not yet." Marcus grabbed the folder, stuffed it into his jacket. "We need more. There has to be more." "There's no time." The footsteps stopped outside the door. A voice. "I know you're in there, Dr. Daniels. Open the door. Let's talk about this like civilized people." Marcus recognized the voice. Gerald Thornton. Keisha looked at him, eyes wide with fear. Marcus looked at the filing cabinet, at the rows of folders stretching back into the shadows, at the 30 years of secrets that were finally within reach. Then he looked at the door. "Dr. Daniels." Thornton's voice was calm, almost pleasant. "You're a smart man. You know how this ends if you don't cooperate. Open the door. We can still make this go away." Marcus walked to the door. He put his hand on the handle, and he opened it. Thornton stood in the corridor flanked by Roy Hendricks and 2 other security guards. His expression was one of weary disappointment, like a teacher dealing with a troublesome student. "Marcus, I had hoped it wouldn't come to this." "I'm sure you did. You have something that belongs to the hospital. I'm going to need it back." Marcus looked at him. At the man who had destroyed his father. At the man who had silenced witnesses and buried evidence and built a career on other people's suffering. "This doesn't belong to you," Marcus said. "It never did." He held up his phone. On the screen, a recording app was running. A red dot blinked steadily. "Everything you've said in the last 3 minutes has been recorded. Every word, every admission, every threat." Thornton's face went white. "You can't, that's inadmissible." "Maybe in court, but not in the press, not in the board of directors meeting, not in the state medical licensing hearing." Marcus stepped forward. "It's over, Dr. Thornton. The secrets you've been keeping for 30 years are about to become public record, and there's nothing you can do to stop it." Thornton's composure cracked. For one moment, Marcus saw something raw beneath the polished exterior. Fear, rage, desperation. "You have no idea what you're doing," Thornton hissed. "No idea who you're dealing with. I built this hospital. I made it what it is, and I will not let some surgeon with a grudge tear it all down. You didn't build anything. You just buried the people who got in your way." Marcus held up his father's file. "But the thing about buried things, Dr. Thornton, they have a way of coming back up." He walked past Thornton, past Hendricks, past the guards who stood frozen with uncertainty. Keisha fell into step beside him. They walked down the corridor, up the stairs, out into the night. Behind them, Gerald Thornton stood alone in the basement, surrounded by 30 years of secrets that were no longer secret. The cracks were starting to show. And Marcus Daniels was just getting started. The recording hit the internet at 6:47 the next morning. Marcus hadn't planned to release it so quickly. He'd intended to consult with an attorney first to build a proper case to do things the right way. But sometime around 3 a.m., lying awake in his bed with his father's file on the nightstand, he realized that the right way was exactly what Thornton was counting on. The right way meant delays. The right way meant lawyers and procedures and committees. The right way gave powerful people time to destroy evidence, silence witnesses, and rewrite history. His father had tried the right way. His father was dead. So Marcus uploaded the recording to YouTube, wrote a brief description of what had happened, the assault, the cover-up, the 30 years of buried complaints, and posted it to every social media platform he could think of. By 7 a.m., it had 10,000 views. By 8 a.m., 100,000. By noon, it was national news. The phone started ringing at 6:52 and didn't stop. Reporters, lawyers, colleagues, strangers. Marcus let them all go to voicemail. He had one call to make first. Amelia answered on the second ring. "Dad, why are there news vans outside Grandma's house?" He'd sent her to stay with Caroline's mother 2 days ago just in case. Now he was grateful for that instinct. "Baby, I need you to listen to me. Something happened at work and it's going to be on the news. People are going to say things about me. Some of them will be true, and some of them won't. But I need you to know that everything I'm doing for the right reasons." "Dad, you're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. But I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" Silence on the line. Then, "Does this have something to do with Grandpa?" Marcus closed his eyes. She was 12, but she'd always been perceptive. Too perceptive. "Yes, baby. It does." "Then I trust you." Her voice was small but steady. "Grandpa was a good person. You always said so. If you're fighting for him, then you're doing the right thing." Marcus felt something break loose in his chest. Something that had been locked away for a very long time. "I love you, Amelia." "I love you too, Dad. Be careful." He hung up. Then he called Patricia Webb. Patricia had been his friend since medical school. They'd studied together, pulled all-nighters together, survived residency together. She'd gone into law while he went into medicine, but they'd stayed close. When Caroline died, Patricia was the one who handled the estate, the insurance, all the paperwork Marcus couldn't face. Now she was going to handle something else entirely. "I saw the video," she said when she answered. "What the hell were you thinking?" "I was thinking that 30 years was long enough." "Marcus, you just accused the chief administrator of one of the largest hospitals in Texas of conspiracy cover-up and falsifying medical records on YouTube without consulting legal counsel." "I know. You know. That's all you have to say." "I have evidence, Patricia. 30 years of evidence. Files, documents, witness statements. Everything Thornton buried is still there in room B12. I have my father's termination papers. I have Eleanor Hayes's letter. I have..." "Who's Eleanor Hayes?" "The nurse whose mother died, the one Thornton silenced. She's been working at the hospital for 30 years, collecting evidence, waiting for someone to come forward." Patricia was quiet for a long moment. "You're telling me there's an insider, a whistleblower who's been building a case for 3 decades?" "Yes." "And she has documentation?" "Yes." "Can she testify?" "I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out." Another pause. "Marcus, I need you to understand something. What you've done, releasing that recording without authorization, making public accusations against a hospital administrator, it opens you up to liability. Defamation, invasion of privacy, breach of employment contract. Thornton's lawyers are going to come after you with everything they have. Let them come. This isn't a game. They will try to destroy you, your career, your reputation, your ability to practice medicine. They will dig up every mistake you've ever made, every complaint ever filed against you, every patient who didn't survive surgery. They will make you the villain." "Then I'll need a good lawyer," Patricia sighed. "You're really going to do this?" "I have to. My father died thinking nobody believed him. I'm not going to let that stand." "Okay." Her voice shifted, becoming businesslike. "I'll file a preemptive motion today documenting your allegations and requesting preservation of evidence. That will make it harder for them to destroy anything else. I'll also reach out to the Department of Justice. What you're describing could constitute a pattern of civil rights violations." "Thank you, Patricia." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get very ugly before it gets better." She wasn't wrong. The hospital's response came at 2:17 p.m. in the form of a press release that landed like a bomb. St. Michael's Medical Center is aware of false and defamatory statements made by Dr. Marcus Daniels regarding hospital administration. These allegations are completely without merit and appear to stem from a personal vendetta related to Dr. Daniels' father, a former employee who was terminated for cause in 1997. The hospital is cooperating fully with authorities investigating the parking garage incident and will pursue all legal remedies against Dr. Daniels for his reckless and damaging statements. Dr. Daniels has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Administrative leave. They'd moved fast. 20 minutes later, security arrived at Marcus's office with boxes and instructions to vacate immediately. He didn't argue. He packed his personal items, photographs, diplomas, the small wooden cross Caroline had given him on their wedding day, and walked out with his head high. The surgical staff lined the hallway. Some of them looked away. Some of them nodded. A few of them reached out to touch his arm as he passed, silent gestures of support that meant more than words could have. Keisha was waiting by the elevator. "You're really doing this," she said. "I'm really doing this. They're going to try to bury you." "They tried to bury my father. I'm still here." She pressed something into his hand. A flash drive. "What is this?" "Everything I have. Every complaint I filed, every document I collected, every name of every person who's been transferred or demoted or pushed out for speaking up." She met his eyes. "I can't testify publicly. I have 2 kids and a mortgage and I can't afford to lose this job. But this I can do." Marcus closed his hand around the drive. "Thank you, Keisha." "Don't thank me, just win." The elevator doors opened. Marcus stepped inside. "One more thing," Keisha said as the doors began to close. "Eleanor Hayes. She's in medical records 3rd floor. She's expecting you." The doors closed. Eleanor Hayes was 67 years old, with silver hair and steady hands and eyes that had seen too much and forgotten nothing. She was waiting in a small office at the back of the medical records department, surrounded by filing cabinets and computer terminals and the accumulated paperwork of a hospital that had been operating for 60 years. "Dr. Daniels." She didn't stand when he entered. "I wondered how long it would take you to find me. You've been sending the documents, the anonymous packages. Some of them. Others came from people who share my concerns." She gestured to a chair. "Sit. We have much to discuss." Marcus sat. "I knew your father," Eleanor said. "Not well, but I knew him. He was a good man, kind, decent. He didn't deserve what happened to him." "Neither did you." Her expression flickered. "You read my letter." "I found it in my father's file. The letter you wrote in 1997 documenting what you witnessed. The letter no one ever read." "Oh, someone read it." Her voice was bitter. "Thornton read it. He read it very carefully. And then he made sure I would never be able to speak about it again." The psychiatric commitment. 2 years. Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. 2 years in a facility being told that I was delusional, that I was imagining things, that my mother's death was natural, and my memories were false. 2 years of medication and therapy, and people looking at me like I was broken. "But you weren't." "No, I wasn't. And when I got out, I made a decision. I would come back to this hospital. I would get a job in medical records where I could access everything. And I would spend the rest of my life collecting evidence until someone finally believed me." 30 years. 30 years. She smiled, and there was nothing happy in it. "Do you know how many complaints I've documented? How many people have been silenced or terminated or pushed out? How many patients have died under suspicious circumstances with no investigation? How many? 47 documented cases of discrimination or retaliation against employees. 12 suspicious deaths with falsified or incomplete records. 6 employees committed to psychiatric facilities after raising concerns about hospital practices." She paused. "And 1 janitor named James Daniels, who tried to tell the truth and paid for it with everything he had." Marcus felt the weight of it settle onto his shoulders. 47 cases, 12 deaths, 6 people locked away for speaking up, and his father one small part of a pattern that stretched back decades. "Why didn't you go to the authorities?" he asked. "The police, the FBI, the medical board." "I tried. In 2005, I submitted an anonymous complaint to the Texas Medical Board. The investigation lasted 6 months and found no wrongdoing. In 2011, I contacted the FBI. They said they needed a credible witness willing to testify. I offered, but when they ran my background, they found the psychiatric commitment. My credibility was destroyed before I ever opened my mouth. Thornton planned it that way. Of course he did. That's how he operates. He doesn't just silence people, he discredits them. Makes them look crazy, unstable, unreliable. So even if they talk, no one believes them. But you kept collecting evidence. I kept collecting evidence. And I kept waiting. She looked at him with something like hope. You're not discredited, Dr. Daniels. You're not unstable. You're the Chief of Pediatric Surgery with 12 years of impeccable service. When you speak, people listen. They're already trying to destroy me. The press released the administrative leave. That's just the beginning. They'll dig up everything they can find. Every mistake, every complaint, every moment of weakness. They'll try to make you look like a bitter, delusional man with a grudge. Then I'll need more than my word. Eleanor reached into her desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Thick, worn, filled with papers. This is everything. Every document I've collected over 30 years. Names, dates, case numbers, witness statements. Evidence that Thornton has been running a systematic cover-up since 1997. She handed it to him. I'm 77 years old, Dr. Daniels. I don't have much time left. But this is my life's work. My legacy. The truth I've been waiting 30 years to tell." Marcus took the folder. It was heavy. Heavier than paper should be. "Why me?" he asked. "Why now?" "Because of what you did after the surgery. You saved that man's son, and then you looked him in the eye and told him you were pressing charges anyway. You didn't let gratitude compromise your principles. You didn't let fear silence you." She smiled, and this time there was warmth in it. "Your father would be proud." The words hit him like a physical blow. "I don't know if I can do this," he said quietly. "I don't know if I'm strong enough." "You don't have to be strong enough alone. There are others. People who've been waiting just like me for someone to lead the way." She stood up steadier than her age suggested. "The question isn't whether you're strong enough. The question is whether you're willing to find out." Marcus looked at the folder in his hands, at the weight of 30 years of truth. "I'm willing," he said. The counterattack came 3 days later. Marcus was at home reviewing Eleanor's files when the process server arrived. The documents were thick, a civil complaint filed in federal court by Garrett and Bradley Whitmore against Dr. Marcus Daniels. The allegations were creative, he had to give them that. Defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, negligent infliction of emotional distress, breach of physician-patient confidentiality, and a claim that made Marcus read it 3 times to make sure he understood: assault and false imprisonment arising from defendant's coercive statements prior to performing surgery on plaintiff's minor child. They were claiming he had threatened them, that his statement about pressing charges constituted coercion, that by telling them he would pursue legal action, he had effectively held their son hostage. It was absurd. It was desperate. And it was exactly what Thornton's lawyers would use to shift the narrative. Patricia called 10 minutes later. "I'm reading the complaint. This is unbelievable." "It's a counterattack. They're trying to make me the defendant instead of the victim." The false imprisonment claim will never survive a motion to dismiss. But the defamation count. Marcus, they're citing your video, your public statements about Thornton. They're using your own words against you. I told the truth. Truth is a defense, but you have to prove it, in court, with evidence that meets evidentiary standards. She paused. Marcus, the discovery process in this case is going to be brutal. They'll have access to your employment records, your patient files, your personal communications. Anything that's remotely relevant, they'll dig up and use. I don't have anything to hide. Everyone has something. A bad day, a harsh word, a moment of frustration. They'll find it and they'll magnify it. That's how this works. Then we fight. We fight. But Marcus, there's something else. What? I got a call this morning from a reporter at the Houston Chronicle. Someone leaked information about your daughter. Marcus's blood went cold. What kind of information? Her school, her schedule, a photograph of her walking to class yesterday. Patricia's voice was tight. They're sending you a message. They can get to her. For a long moment, Marcus couldn't breathe. They're threatening my daughter. They're showing you what they're capable of. It's intimidation. Probably not actionable legally, but effective. Yes, effective. Marcus set down the complaint. His hands were shaking. Not with fear this time, with rage. I want to know who leaked that information. Marcus, I want to know who took that photograph of my daughter. I want to know who gave it to the press. And when I find out, I want them prosecuted. We can file a complaint request and investigation. I don't want a complaint. I want action. My daughter is 12 years old, Patricia. She's innocent. She has nothing to do with any of this. I know. Patricia's voice softened. Marcus, I understand how you feel. But if you react emotionally, if you do something rash, you play into their hands. They want you to make a mistake. They want you to give them ammunition. So, what do I do? You stay focused. You let me handle the legal response. You protect your daughter by keeping her away from the spotlight. And you trust the process. The process? Marcus laughed, and there was no humor in it. The process has been failing people like me for 30 years. I know, but this time is different. This time we have evidence. This time we have witnesses. This time we have public attention. She paused. And this time we have you. The witnesses started coming forward that night. The first was a nurse named Sandra Chen, Robert Chen's daughter. Robert had been one of the employees Eleanor mentioned in her letter, one of the people who witnessed Thornton's falsification, and was terminated within 6 months. Sandra called Marcus directly. My father died in 2003, she said. Lung cancer. But before he died, he told me everything. About Dr. Thornton, about what he covered up, about how they forced him out. He made me promise to keep his records safe in case anyone ever came looking for the truth. Do you still have them? Everything. Letters, memos, copies of documents he took before they fired him. I've been holding on to them for 20 years. Why didn't you come forward before? Because I was scared. Because I saw what happened to Eleanor Hayes. Because I had a family and a career, and I didn't want to lose everything. Her voice cracked. But then I saw your video. I saw you standing up to them, refusing to be silenced, and I thought, if he can do it, maybe I can too. The second witness was Theodore Marsh, the bailiff Marcus had met in the hallway. True to his word, he was ready to testify. I've got 30 years of memories, Theodore said. 30 years of watching Hendricks operate, taking orders from people he shouldn't have been taking orders from, making problems disappear. I may not have documents, but I have stories. And I remember names. The third witness was someone Marcus didn't expect, a former hospital board member named David Reeves, who had served from 1998 to 2007. I knew something was wrong, Reeves told him over the phone. Thornton was too smooth, too protected. Every time someone raised a concern, it vanished. Every time there was a complaint, it was resolved without action. I tried to investigate, but I was blocked at every turn. He paused. I resigned in 2007 because I couldn't stomach it anymore. I've regretted my silence ever since. By the end of the week, Marcus had statements from 11 witnesses. People who had seen, who had known who, had been waiting for someone to finally ask the right questions. Patricia compiled everything into a supplemental filing for the federal investigation she'd requested. The DOJ had initially declined to comment, but with each new witness, each new document, the pressure grew. Then came the call Marcus had been dreading. It was from his daughter. Dad. Amelia's voice was small, scared. There's a man outside Grandma's house. He's been there all day watching. Grandma called the police, but they said he wasn't doing anything wrong. Marcus's heart stopped. What does he look like? Older. Gray hair. He's sitting in a black car. He keeps looking at the house. Amelia, listen to me. Stay inside. Don't go near the windows. I'm coming to get you. Dad, I'm scared. I know, baby. I know. But I'm going to fix this. I promise. He hung up and immediately called Patricia. They have someone watching my daughter's location. I need to move her somewhere safe. Marcus, if you take her out of the state, it could be seen as flight. I don't care how it looks. My daughter is being stalked. I'm getting her somewhere they can't find her. Okay. Patricia's voice was calm, professional. I'll arrange a safe house through a client I trust. Completely off the books. But Marcus, this escalates things. If they're willing to target your daughter, they're not going to stop. Neither am I. He drove through the night 4 hours to his mother-in-law's house, arriving just as the sun was coming up. The black car was gone, but the fear in Amelia's eyes wasn't. Dad! She ran to him the moment he walked through the door. Dad, what's happening? Why are people watching us? He held her tight, feeling her heart racing against his chest. Some bad people don't like that I'm telling the truth about things that happened at the hospital. They're trying to scare me into stopping. Are you going to stop? Marcus pulled back, looked at his daughter's face. So much of Caroline in her. The same fierce eyes, the same stubborn set to the jaw. "No," he said. "I'm not going to stop." "Good." Amelia's voice was steady now. "Grandpa wouldn't want you to stop. Mom wouldn't want you to stop." She squared her shoulders. "I don't want you to stop. Even if it means we have to hide for a while, even if it's scary. Even then," she took his hand. "You're fighting for something important. I understand that now. And I'm proud of you." Marcus felt tears prick his eyes. He blinked them back. "When did you get so grown up? I've had a good teacher." He drove her to the safe house that afternoon, a cabin in the hill country owned by a retired judge who owed Patricia a favor. Remote, secure, invisible. "I'll call every day," he told Amelia as he prepared to leave. "And this won't last forever. Once the investigation is over, once everything is out in the open, we'll go home. I promise." "I know." She hugged him fiercely. "Be careful, Dad." "I will." He drove back to Houston alone, the empty passenger seat a constant reminder of what he was fighting for. The break came 2 weeks later. Marcus was meeting with Patricia in her office when her phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face changed. "What is it?" Marcus asked. "The DOJ. They've opened a formal pattern or practice investigation into St. Michael's Medical Center." She looked up at him. "Marcus, this is huge. This means federal investigators subpoena power criminal liability. Thornton can't make this go away." "What triggered it?" "Your witnesses. Eleanor's documentation. But mostly—" She paused, a small smile crossing her face. "Mostly Roy Hendricks." "Hendricks." He flipped. "Cut a deal with federal prosecutors this morning. Full cooperation in exchange for immunity on the lesser charges." Marcus stared at her. "Hendricks is talking. Hendricks is singing. 30 years of following orders, covering up complaints, intimidating witnesses, he's documented everything. Names, dates, specific instructions from Thornton." She shook her head. "I guess he decided that loyalty only goes so far when you're facing federal prison." "What did he give them?" "Everything, including something that changes everything." Patricia pulled up a document on her computer. According to Hendricks's statement, Thornton didn't just cover up discrimination complaints. He ran a scheme. When patients died under questionable circumstances, Thornton would falsify records in exchange for payments from the families. Keep things quiet, avoid lawsuits, protect the hospital's reputation. He was selling cover-ups. For 30 years, Hendricks estimates at least 20 cases. And here's the thing, Marcus, one of those cases was your father's. Marcus went very still. "What do you mean?" "The patient whose death your father witnessed being covered up, Margaret Hayes, Eleanor's mother, she wasn't just a routine case." According to Hendricks, the attending physician paid Thornton $50,000 to make the investigation go away. Your father found out about the payment. That's why they moved so fast to discredit him. For a long moment, Marcus couldn't speak. All these years, he'd thought his father had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. A janitor who saw something he shouldn't have, who told the truth when lying would have been easier. But it was more than that. His father had uncovered something much bigger than a single falsified death certificate. He'd stumbled onto a criminal enterprise and he'd paid for it with everything he had. "Is there proof," Marcus finally asked, "of the payment?" Hendricks kept records. Bank transfers, coded communications, everything. He was Thornton's bagman for 3 decades and he documented every transaction. Patricia's expression was grim. "Marcus, your father wasn't just a victim of discrimination. He was a witness to a crime, and Thornton destroyed him to protect a criminal conspiracy." Marcus closed his eyes. He thought of his father in the hospital bed at the end, thin and gray, barely able to speak. He thought of the folder pressed into his hands, the words whispered through cracked lips. "They'll try to make you forget. Don't let them." "I won't forget," Marcus whispered. "I won't ever forget." "You don't have to," Patricia said softly, "because now everyone is going to know." The indictment came down 3 days later. Gerald Thornton was arrested at his home at 6:15 a.m., led out in handcuffs past a wall of cameras and reporters. The charges: conspiracy to obstruct justice, falsifying medical records, bribery, and multiple counts of civil rights violations. Roy Hendricks was arrested the same morning, but was released within hours, his cooperation agreement guaranteeing reduced charges and no prison time. Bradley and Vanessa Whitmore withdrew their civil complaint that afternoon. Their attorney released a terse statement: "My clients have decided not to pursue litigation at this time." The hospital board called an emergency meeting and voted to place Dr. Thornton on administrative leave pending the outcome of criminal proceedings. His office was sealed. His files were seized. 30 years of secrets were being cataloged, documented, prepared for trial. And Marcus Daniels, still technically on administrative leave, himself stood at his window and watched the sun set over Houston. His phone buzzed. A text from Amelia. "I saw the news. You did it, Dad. You actually did it." He typed back, "We did it. All of us together. When can I come home?" "Soon, baby. Very soon." He set down the phone. Outside, the city lights were coming on one by one, pushing back the darkness. It wasn't over. There would be trials and appeals and motions to dismiss. There would be more threats, more attacks, more attempts to silence the truth. The system that had protected Thornton for 30 years wouldn't crumble overnight, but it was cracking. And Marcus Daniels had learned something important. Cracks were how the light got in. His phone buzzed again, this time a call. Unknown number. He answered. "Dr. Daniels?" A woman's voice, elderly but strong. "This is Eleanor Hayes. I just wanted to say thank you." "You're the one who should be thanked. You collected the evidence. You waited. You never gave up." "I couldn't have done anything with it alone. You gave me something I'd lost a long time ago." Her voice cracked slightly. "Hope." "We're not done yet, Eleanor. There's still a long road ahead." "I know. But for the first time in 30 years, I believe we might actually reach the end of it." She paused. "Your father would be so proud of you, Marcus. So incredibly proud." Marcus felt the tears come this time. He didn't fight them. "Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. Thank you for believing. That's all any of us ever needed someone to believe." She hung up. Marcus stood in the darkness of his empty house, tears streaming down his face, and allowed himself to feel something he hadn't felt in a very long time. Not just hope. Victory. Small, fragile, incomplete, but real. The trial began on a Tuesday morning in March, 11 months after Bradley Whitmore's fist connected with Marcus Daniels' jaw in a parking garage. Marcus arrived at the federal courthouse at 7:30 a.m., an hour before proceedings were scheduled to start. He wore his best suit, the charcoal one Caroline had picked out for him years ago, the one he saved for occasions that mattered. His father's watch was on his wrist, the leather strap worn soft with time. Patricia met him at the entrance. "How are you feeling?" "Like I'm about to jump off a cliff and hope there's water at the bottom." "That's about right." She handed him a coffee. "The prosecution is confident. They have Hendricks's testimony, Eleanor's documentation, the financial records. But Thornton's lawyers are good. They're going to try to make this about you, your motives, your credibility, your personal vendetta." "I know. They're going to bring up your father. They're going to say you manufactured this whole thing to avenge a termination that happened 30 years ago." "I know that too." Patricia studied his face. "And you're ready for that?" Marcus thought about his father, about the folder pressed into his hands, about the promise he'd made in a hospital room 26 years ago. "I've been ready my whole life." The courtroom was packed. Reporters filled the gallery. Camera crews waited outside. The story had captured national attention. A black surgeon assaulted in his own workplace, a 30-year conspiracy to silence witnesses and cover up crimes, a hospital administrator who had built an empire on other people's suffering. Gerald Thornton sat at the defense table, flanked by 3 attorneys in expensive suits. He looked diminished, somehow smaller than Marcus remembered. The silver hair was thinner. The confident smile was gone. He looked like what he was, a 72-year-old man, facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. Bradley and Vanessa Whitmore were not in the courtroom. Their case had been separated from Thornton's. They faced state charges for assault and filing a false police report scheduled for trial the following month. But their shadow hung over everything. The assault that had started it all. The moment that had cracked the foundation. The judge entered. The Honorable Maria Santos, appointed to the federal bench 15 years ago, known for her fairness and her intolerance for courtroom theatrics. All rise. Marcus stood with everyone else, feeling the weight of the moment settle onto his shoulders. This was it. After everything, the assault, the threats, the sleepless nights, the fear for his daughter, this was where it would be decided. In this room, before this judge with 12 strangers, weighing the evidence and determining whether 30 years of secrets would finally see justice. Judge Santos took her seat and surveyed the courtroom. This is the matter of United States versus Gerald Thornton. Are all parties ready to proceed? The government is ready, Your Honor. The defense is ready, Your Honor. Very well. Mr. Prosecutor, your opening statement. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Torres rose from his chair. He was young for a case this significant, mid-30s, intense, with a reputation for meticulous preparation and devastating cross-examinations. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this case is about power. The power to silence. The power to destroy. The power to decide whose truth matters and whose doesn't. He walked slowly toward the jury box. For 30 years, Gerald Thornton wielded that power at St. Michael's Medical Center. He built a system, a machine designed to protect the hospital's reputation at any cost. And when people got in the way, when they saw things they shouldn't have seen, when they tried to speak up, he crushed them. Torres paused, letting the words settle. You will hear testimony from Roy Hendricks, who served as Dr. Thornton's enforcer for 3 decades. You will hear how he intimidated witnesses, buried complaints, and made problems disappear on Dr. Thornton's orders. He turned to face Thornton directly. You will hear testimony from Eleanor Hayes, whose mother died under suspicious circumstances at St. Michael's in 1997. You will hear how she tried to report what she witnessed, and how Dr. Thornton had her committed to a psychiatric facility to silence her. The courtroom was utterly silent. You will see documents, thousands of pages of documents that prove a systematic pattern of cover-up, bribery, and obstruction of justice. You will see financial records showing payments to Dr. Thornton in exchange for making investigations go away. You will see evidence that this man, Torres pointed at Thornton, destroyed lives, silenced witnesses, and perverted the mission of the institution he was supposed to serve. He walked back toward the prosecution table, then stopped and turned. And you will hear from Dr. Marcus Daniels, a surgeon, a healer, a man who was assaulted in his own workplace simply for being black in the wrong place at the wrong time, a man whose father was destroyed by the same system that tried to destroy him, a man who refused to be silent. Torres looked at the jury, making eye contact with each member in turn. The defense will tell you this is about a personal vendetta. They'll tell you Dr. Daniels manufactured evidence, coerced witnesses, orchestrated a conspiracy to bring down a respected hospital administrator. He shook his head slowly. Don't believe them. The evidence will show you the truth. Gerald Thornton is not the victim here. He's the perpetrator. And it's time, after 30 years, for him to be held accountable. Torres sat down. Judge Santos nodded to the defense table. Mr. Crawford. Dennis Crawford was Thornton's lead attorney, 60 years old, silver-tongued, with a reputation for making juries doubt things they'd seen with their own eyes. Ladies and gentlemen, he rose slowly, buttoning his jacket. My colleague has painted a dramatic picture, a villain in a white coat, a conspiracy spanning decades, innocent victims crying out for justice. He smiled, the expression almost sympathetic. But pictures can be deceiving. And this picture, this story, the government wants you to believe has a fatal flaw. Crawford walked toward the jury box, his movements deliberate, measured. It's built on the testimony of liars. He let that word hang in the air. Roy Hendricks, the government's star witness. A man who, by his own admission, spent 30 years doing things he now claims were wrong. Things he was never forced to do. Things he was paid handsomely for. And now, facing federal prison, he's willing to say anything to save himself. Crawford spread his hands. Eleanor Hayes, a woman who spent 2 years in a psychiatric facility. A woman whose mental health records document a history of paranoid ideation and false memories. A woman who has openly stated that she's devoted her life to destroying Gerald Thornton. He turned to look at Marcus. And Dr. Marcus Daniels, a man whose father was terminated from St. Michael's Medical Center in 1997. A man who has publicly admitted that he believes Dr. Thornton is responsible for his father's death. A man who has every reason, every motivation to manufacture a case against the person he blames for his family's suffering. Crawford walked back toward the defense table. The evidence in this case is tainted. The witnesses are compromised. The entire prosecution is built on the foundation of a personal grudge that has festered for 30 years. He stopped, turned back to the jury. Dr. Gerald Thornton is a dedicated physician who has devoted his life to healing. He has overseen the expansion of St. Michael's from a regional hospital to one of the finest medical centers in the country. He has saved countless lives. He has served his community with distinction. Crawford's voice hardened. And now, because one man with a grudge managed to convince federal prosecutors to take his word over decades of exemplary service, Dr. Thornton sits before you as a criminal defendant. He shook his head. That's not justice. That's persecution. And I trust that when you've heard all the evidence really heard, it weighed it, considered its source, you'll see this case for what it is, a tragedy of misplaced vengeance. He sat down. Judge Santos looked at Torres. Call your first witness. The government calls Roy Hendricks. The former security supervisor walked to the witness stand like a man approaching his own execution. His face was gray, his hands visibly trembling. Whatever deal he'd made with prosecutors, whatever immunity he'd secured, it hadn't erased the weight of what he was about to do. Mr. Hendricks, Torres approached him. Please state your employment history with St. Michael's Medical Center. I was employed there from 1995 until my resignation 2 months ago. The first 7 years I worked in various security positions. Starting in 2002, I served as security supervisor. And in that role, what were your primary responsibilities? Hendricks swallowed. Officially, I managed the security team, scheduling training incident response. Unofficially, I handled problems for Dr. Thornton. What kind of problems? Complaints, witnesses, people who saw things or knew things that could damage the hospital's reputation. Hendricks' voice dropped. People who needed to be managed. Can you give the jury an example? Hendricks closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, he looked directly at Marcus. In 1997, a janitor named James Daniels witnessed Dr. Thornton falsifying a death certificate. He reported it through official channels. Dr. Thornton called me into his office and told me to make the problem go away. How did you make the problem go away? First, we pulled Daniels's personnel file and planted documentation suggesting performance issues. Then I spoke to his supervisors, suggested that he was becoming unreliable, that his work was suffering. Within 2 weeks, we had enough paper trail to justify termination. Marcus felt his hands clench beneath the table. He forced himself to breathe. What about the other witnesses? The people who could corroborate Mr. Daniels' account? There were 3 others. A nurse named Eleanor Hayes and 2 other employees. Eleanor was the most dangerous because her mother was the patient who died. What did you do about Eleanor Hayes? Hendricks's voice dropped even lower. Dr. Thornton had connections on the hospital's psychiatric staff. We arranged for Eleanor to be evaluated. She was encouraged to describe her concerns about her mother's death in ways that sounded delusional. Based on that evaluation, she was involuntarily committed. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Judge Santos gavelled for silence. She spent 2 years in a psychiatric facility, Torres said. For telling the truth. Yes. And the other 2 employees? One was transferred to a facility in Dallas. The other resigned after we made it clear that his career would be over if he stayed. Torres walked back to the prosecution table and picked up a folder. Mr. Hendricks, I'm showing you what's been marked as Government Exhibit 47. Can you identify this document? Hendricks looked at it. His face went even grayer. It's a record of payments. Money transferred to Dr. Thornton from various sources between 1997 and 2019. What were these payments for? Cover-ups. When patients died under circumstances that could lead to malpractice suits or criminal investigations, Dr. Thornton would sometimes approach the families or the physicians involved and offer to make the situation go away, for a price. And how much money are we talking about? Hendricks looked at the document. Over the entire period, approximately $4.2 million. The courtroom erupted. Judge Santos banged her gavel repeatedly. Order, I will have order in this courtroom. Marcus sat frozen. $4.2 million. 30 years of silencing victims, burying truth, destroying lives, and Thornton had profited from every single one. Torres let the chaos settle before continuing. Mr. Hendricks, do you recognize the name Margaret Hayes? Yes, she was Eleanor Hayes's mother. She died at St. Michael's in March 1997. What do you know about her death? She died during a routine procedure. The attending physician made an error, a serious error. The kind that would have meant malpractice suits, medical board investigations, possible criminal charges. What happened instead? Dr. Thornton falsified the death certificate, listed the cause of death as natural complications rather than medical negligence. The physician paid him $50,000 for the service. And James Daniels witnessed this. He was cleaning an office nearby when Thornton and the physician discussed the arrangement. He overheard enough to understand what was happening. He reported it. Hendricks paused. And he paid for it with everything he had. Torres turned to the jury. No further questions. Crawford approached the witness stand slowly like a predator circling wounded prey. Mr. Hendricks, you testified that you spent 30 years doing Dr. Thornton's bidding, intimidating witnesses, burying complaints, destroying careers. Yes. And during all that time you never once reported these activities to authorities? No. Never once expressed concern to your supervisors? No. Never once refused an order? No. Because you were being paid? Yes. I was compensated. How much? Hendricks shifted uncomfortably. Over the years, approximately $600,000 above my regular salary. $600,000. Crawford let the number hang. So you profited handsomely from these activities you now describe as criminal? Yes. And now, only now, when you're facing federal charges yourself, you've suddenly developed a conscience. I was offered immunity. I took it. You were offered a way out, and you took it. Crawford moved closer. Mr. Hendricks, isn't it true that you would say anything at all to avoid prison? I'm telling the truth. The truth as you see it now. A truth that happens to align perfectly with your self-interest. Crawford turned to the jury. A truth purchased with immunity. Objection. Torres was on his feet. Argumentative. Sustained. Move on, Mr. Crawford. Crawford nodded, but his point had been made. He continued the cross-examination for another hour, chipping away at Hendricks's credibility, highlighting inconsistencies, emphasizing his motivation to cooperate. When it was over, Marcus couldn't tell if the jury believed Hendricks or not, but there was more evidence to come. Eleanor Hayes took the stand on the 4th day. She walked slowly, steadily, her silver hair gleaming under the courtroom lights. At 77, she looked every one of her years, but there was steel in her spine and fire in her eyes. Torres began gently. "Ms. Hayes, please tell the jury about your mother, Margaret Hayes." Eleanor's voice was soft but clear. "My mother was 62 years old when she died. She went into St. Michael's for a routine gallbladder surgery. She never came home." "What happened?" "The surgeon made a mistake, cut something he shouldn't have cut. My mother bled internally for hours before anyone noticed. By the time they realized what was happening, it was too late." "What did the hospital tell you about her death?" "They said it was natural causes, complications from the surgery. They said it was rare but unavoidable." Eleanor's hands clenched in her lap. "They lied." "How did you discover the truth?" "I was a nurse at St. Michael's. I had friends in the surgery department. One of them told me what really happened off the record because she was afraid. She said the surgeon had been negligent, that there should have been an investigation, but that someone high up was protecting him." "What did you do?" "I started asking questions. I requested my mother's medical records. I found discrepancies, medications listed that she never received, procedures documented that never happened. I wrote a letter to the hospital's ethics committee describing what I had discovered." "And then what happened?" Eleanor's voice dropped. "Dr. Thornton called me into his office. He was very kind at first, sympathetic. He said he understood my grief, that it was natural to look for someone to blame. He suggested I might benefit from counseling." "Did you take his suggestion?" "No. I told him I didn't need counseling. I needed answers." He got very quiet then. He said that sometimes people who pursue difficult truths end up hurting themselves. He said he hoped that wouldn't happen to me." "What did you understand him to mean?" "That I should stop asking questions or there would be consequences." "Did you stop?" "No, I wrote my letter, the one that's now Exhibit 12. I documented everything I knew about my mother's death and Dr. Thornton's involvement in covering it up. I submitted it to the Ethics Committee on April 10, 1997. "What happened next?" Eleanor's composure cracked slightly. 5 days later, I was called into Dr. Thornton's office again. This time there were 2 other people present, psychiatrists. They said they were concerned about me. They said colleagues had reported that I was behaving erratically, making paranoid accusations, showing signs of mental instability. Were any of these concerns legitimate? No. I was grieving. I was angry, but I was not mentally ill. What happened then? They recommended a psychiatric evaluation. I agreed, thinking I could prove I was fine and then continue my investigation. Instead, her voice broke. Instead, they committed me, involuntarily. They said I was a danger to myself and others. They said I was experiencing paranoid delusions about my mother's death. How long were you hospitalized? 2 years, 3 months, and 14 days. A collective gasp ran through the courtroom. And when you were released, all my evidence was gone. My mother's records had been sealed. The colleagues who had supported me had been transferred or had resigned. Everyone who might have corroborated my story had been silenced. She looked directly at Thornton. He destroyed everything. And then he destroyed me. But you didn't give up. No. Eleanor straightened her spine. I got a job in medical records. I spent the next 30 years collecting evidence documenting every case of cover-up I could find, waiting for someone who could finally make the truth matter. And did you find that person? Eleanor looked at Marcus, really looked at him with an expression that held 30 years of pain and hope and perseverance. I found James Daniels's son, she said, and he was everything I'd been praying for. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. He didn't wipe them away. No further questions, Torres said quietly. Crawford's cross-examination of Eleanor was brutal. He spent 2 hours questioning her mental health history, her credibility, her obsession with Gerald Thornton. He produced psychiatric records that documented her hospitalization, implied that her memories were unreliable, suggested that her testimony was the product of decades of delusional fixation. Eleanor didn't waver. She answered every question with the same steady voice, the same unflinching gaze. She had spent 30 years preparing for this moment. Nothing Crawford said could shake her. When it was over, she stepped down from the witness stand and walked past Marcus. She reached out and squeezed his hand just for a moment. "For James," she whispered, "and for Margaret." Marcus testified on the 7th day. He told the jury about the assault in the parking garage, about the false 911 call, the dismissed complaint, the threat from Thornton, about his father's termination, his death, the promise made in a hospital room, about room B12 and the files that had been hidden there for 30 years. He spoke for nearly 4 hours. He did not embellish. He did not dramatize. He simply told the truth clearly, precisely the way he had learned to present evidence in medical cases. When Crawford cross-examined him, Marcus remained calm. Yes, he had a personal interest in the case. Yes, his father had been terminated by Thornton. Yes, he had been angry when he released the video. "But my anger," Marcus said, "doesn't change what's in those files. My father's termination doesn't change what Eleanor witnessed. My personal history doesn't change the fact that Gerald Thornton ran a criminal enterprise out of this hospital for 30 years. You expect the jury to believe that your judgment isn't clouded by personal vendetta." Marcus looked at the jury. "I expect the jury to look at the evidence, the documents, the financial records, the testimony of witnesses who have nothing to gain from lying. And I expect them to reach the same conclusion I did, that the truth matters, that it has always mattered, and that 30 years of silence doesn't change what happened, it just makes accountability more urgent." Crawford had no response. The closing arguments came on the 12th day. Torres summarized the evidence, the documents, the testimony, the pattern of cover-up that stretched across 3 decades. He reminded the jury of Eleanor's courage, of the lives destroyed, of the families denied justice. Crawford made one last attempt to shift the narrative. He called Marcus a man on a mission, described Eleanor as sadly compromised, painted Thornton as a victim of zealous prosecution and personal vengeance. The jury deliberated for 3 days. Marcus spent those 3 days in a small apartment near the courthouse, unable to eat, unable to sleep, unable to do anything but wait. Patricia called with updates. Keisha called with encouragement. Amelia called to say she loved him. Eleanor called once late on the 2nd night. "Whatever happens," she said, "we told the truth. After 30 years, we finally told the truth. Whatever the jury decides, they can't take that away from us." "How do you stay so calm?" "I'm not calm. I'm terrified." She laughed softly. "But I'm also free. For the first time in 30 years, I'm free. The truth is out there now. People heard it. Whatever happens next, at least I did what I came to do." Marcus thought about that for a long time after she hung up. She was right. Whatever the verdict, they had accomplished something real. They had forced the truth into the light. They had made people listen. But he still wanted justice. He still wanted Thornton to pay for what he'd done to Eleanor, to his father, to all the others who had been silenced and discredited and destroyed. He still wanted to win. The call came at 4:47 p.m. on the 3rd day. "The jury has reached a verdict." Marcus's heart stopped, then started again at twice its normal rate. He made it to the courtroom in 12 minutes. Patricia was waiting at the entrance. She squeezed his arm, but didn't speak. The gallery was packed. Every seat taken, people standing along the walls. The tension was thick enough to choke on. Judge Santos entered. The jury filed in. Marcus tried to read their faces, but they were impossible to decipher. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" The foreperson stood, a middle-aged woman with glasses and a serious expression. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of conspiracy to obstruct justice, how does the jury find guilty?" The courtroom erupted. Judge Santos gavelled for order. "On the charge of falsifying medical records, how does the jury find guilty?" More noise, more gaveling. "On the charge of bribery, how does the jury find guilty?" Marcus felt his legs go weak. Patricia grabbed his arm. On the charges of civil rights violations, counts 1 through 7, how does the jury find guilty on all counts? The courtroom exploded. People were shouting, crying, embracing. Reporters were rushing for the exits. In the chaos, Marcus stood perfectly still, unable to move, unable to speak, unable to do anything but feel the weight of 30 years, finally lifting from his shoulders. Gerald Thornton sat at the defense table, his face gray, his hands trembling. His attorneys were speaking to him urgently, but he didn't seem to hear them. He looked like a man who had just watched his entire world crumble to dust. Judge Santos restored order with difficulty. Sentencing will take place in 6 weeks. The defendant is remanded into custody pending sentencing. She paused, looked out at the courtroom. This matter is concluded. The gavel fell. It was over. Marcus felt someone touch his shoulder. He turned. Eleanor Hayes stood beside him, tears streaming down her face, her aged hands reaching for his. "We did it," she whispered. "Marcus, we did it." He pulled her into an embrace, held her tight, let himself feel what he hadn't allowed himself to feel in all the months of fighting and fear and uncertainty. Relief, triumph, vindication. And beneath it all, a quiet voice that sounded like his father. "You remembered. You kept your promise." "I remembered, Dad," Marcus whispered. "I remembered." 6 weeks after the verdict, Gerald Thornton stood before Judge Santos for sentencing. Marcus sat in the gallery with Eleanor on one side and Patricia on the other. Keisha was there too, along with Sandra Chen and Theodore Marsh, and a dozen other witnesses who had come forward during the trial. They filled an entire row, a silent testament to the lives Thornton had damaged, and the courage it had taken to finally speak. The courtroom was quieter than it had been during the trial. The media frenzy had died down. The cameras were gone. This was just the ending, the final chapter of a story that had taken 30 years to tell. Thornton looked older than he had even 6 weeks ago. Prison had stripped away the veneer of authority. Without his expensive suits and his corner office and his network of protectors, he was just a 72-year-old man facing the consequences of a lifetime of cruelty. Judge Santos reviewed the pre-sentencing report in silence. When she looked up, her expression was grave. "Dr. Thornton, you have been found guilty of conspiracy to obstruct justice, falsifying medical records, bribery, and multiple counts of civil rights violations. Before I impose sentence, do you have anything you wish to say?" Thornton's attorney whispered something to him. Thornton shook his head and rose slowly to his feet. "Your Honor." His voice was hoarse, diminished. "I devoted my life to medicine, to healing. Everything I did to protect the institution I served. By destroying innocent people," Judge Santos's voice was sharp. "By silencing witnesses, by having a nurse committed to a psychiatric facility because she told the truth about her mother's death. I made difficult decisions in difficult circumstances. You made criminal decisions, Dr. Thornton. You ran a scheme that prioritized reputation over human lives. You accepted bribes to cover up medical negligence. You systematically destroyed anyone who threatened to expose you." She shook her head. "That's not protection. That's predation." Thornton had no response. Judge Santos looked at her notes, then at the gallery. "I've received victim impact statements from 37 individuals and families affected by the defendant's actions. I've read accounts of careers destroyed, families torn apart, lives derailed. I've read about Eleanor Hayes, who lost 2 years of her life in a psychiatric facility for the crime of seeking justice for her mother. I've read about James Daniels, who died believing that no one would ever know the truth." She turned back to Thornton. "The damage you've done cannot be undone. No sentence I impose can give Eleanor Hayes back her lost years. No sentence can bring James Daniels back to his son. No sentence can restore the lives you destroyed in your pursuit of power and self-preservation." She paused. "But I can ensure that you face consequences, real consequences, the kind you denied to your victims for 30 years. Marcus felt Eleanor's hand find his. He squeezed it tight. "Gerald Thornton, I sentence you to 25 years in federal prison with no possibility of parole for 15 years. You are ordered to pay restitution in the amount of $4.2 million, the sum you received in bribes over your criminal career to be distributed among the victims of your schemes. You are permanently barred from practicing medicine or holding any position of authority in a healthcare institution. 25 years. For a 72-year-old man, it was effectively a life sentence. Thornton's legs buckled. His attorneys caught him, helped him to his chair. He sat there, head bowed, as the reality of what had happened washed over him. Judge Santos looked at the gallery one final time. This case has revealed systemic failures at every level of St. Michael's Medical Center. I am referring my findings to the Department of Justice for investigation of institutional practices and potential civil rights violations beyond those addressed in this trial. I am also recommending that the Texas Medical Board conduct a comprehensive review of all cases handled by Dr. Thornton during his tenure. She gathered her papers. The defendant is remanded into custody. This court is adjourned. The gavel fell. Marcus watched as federal marshals led Thornton away. The man who had destroyed his father, who had silenced Eleanor, who had built a career on other people's suffering, reduced to a shuffling figure in handcuffs, disappearing through a side door. It should have felt triumphant. It should have felt like victory. Instead, Marcus felt something more complicated. Relief, yes. Vindication, certainly. But also a deep, bone-tired sadness for all the years that had been lost. All the lives that had been broken. All the truth that had been buried while Thornton grew rich and powerful and untouchable. Eleanor seemed to understand. She leaned close and whispered, "It doesn't bring them back, does it, my mother? Your father, all the others." "No," Marcus said. "It doesn't. But it matters anyway." "Yes." He looked at her. "It matters anyway." The Whitmore's trial began 3 weeks later. It was smaller than Thornton's trial state charges, rather than federal a local courtroom, rather than the federal building. But for Marcus, it was no less significant. This was where it had all started. A fist in a parking garage. A false 911 call. The moment that had cracked the foundation. Bradley and Vanessa Whitmore sat at the defense table, looking nothing like the confident couple who had confronted Marcus in the garage 18 months ago. Bradley had lost weight. Vanessa's carefully maintained appearance had given way to exhaustion. They looked like people who had been living under unbearable pressure for a very long time. Marcus testified on the second day. He described the assault in clinical detail, the words, the shove, the impact of his skull against the concrete pillar. He played the 911 recording, Vanessa's voice describing him as aggressive and suspicious. He showed the photographs of his injuries. When the defense attorney cross-examined him, Marcus remained calm. Yes, he had been walking through a parking garage at 5:50 in the morning. Yes, he had refused to show identification. Yes, he had spoken firmly to the Whitmores when they confronted him. "But I was not aggressive," Marcus said. "I was not threatening. I was standing in a public parking structure trying to get to work when your clients attacked me based on the color of my skin. That's not a misunderstanding. That's assault." The defense attorney had no effective response. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Bradley Whitmore was sentenced to 18 months in state prison for assault and battery. Vanessa Whitmore was sentenced to 2 years of probation and 300 hours of community service for filing a false police report. As the verdicts were read, Marcus watched their faces. Bradley looked broken, hollowed out by the weight of consequence. But Vanessa looked different. There was something in her eyes that Marcus recognized, not defiance, not denial, something that might in time become understanding. After the sentencing, as the courtroom emptied, Vanessa approached him. Marcus tensed, expecting hostility, but her face was different. Stripped of the arrogance, the performative fear, all the armor she had worn that morning in the garage. "Dr. Daniels?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I know I have no right to speak to you. I know nothing I say can undo what we did. Then why are you talking to me? Because I need you to know that I understand now. Her eyes were wet. I've spent the last 18 months in therapy trying to understand how I became the person who called 911 on a man who was just walking to work. Trying to understand the fear, the assumptions, the ugliness I didn't even know was inside me. Marcus said nothing. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that what you did standing up, refusing to be silenced, pursuing justice, even when it would have been easier to let it go, it changed something in me. It forced me to look at myself in a way I never had before. And what did you see? Vanessa flinched. Someone I didn't recognize. Someone I don't want to be anymore. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. This is a letter to Tyler, for when he's old enough to understand. It explains what happened, what his father and I did, and why it was wrong. It tells him about you, about how you saved his life, even after we tried to destroy yours. Her hand trembled as she held it out. I want him to know the truth. I want him to learn from our mistakes. Marcus looked at the letter. Looked at the woman who had tried to have him arrested for walking while black. He didn't take it. Mrs. Whitmore, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but my forgiveness isn't going to heal whatever's broken inside you. That's work you have to do yourself. I know. And a letter to your son isn't going to undo what he'll eventually learn about his parents. That's a conversation you'll have to have with him directly. I know that too. So why tell me any of this? Vanessa's composure cracked. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Because you're the only one who can tell me if there's any point. If people like me can actually change. If it's possible to become better than the worst thing you've ever done. Marcus thought about his father. About Eleanor. About all the people who had been given no chance to change, no opportunity for redemption, because Thornton and his system had crushed them before they could grow. I don't know if you can change Mrs. Whitmore. That's not for me to decide. But I know that the people your husband and I fought against, Thornton Hendricks, all the others, they never tried. They never looked at themselves honestly. They never asked whether they could be better. He met her eyes. The fact that you're asking, that's something. I don't know if it's enough, but it's something. He walked away, leaving her standing there with the letter still in her hands. The settlement came through 2 months later. Patricia had filed a civil lawsuit against St. Michael's Medical Center on behalf of Marcus and the other victims. The hospital's new leadership, installed after the board ousted everyone connected to Thornton, had been eager to resolve the matter quickly. The terms were significant. Financial compensation for all documented victims of Thornton's schemes. A formal apology read into the public record, acknowledging the hospital's failures. New policies on complaint, handling discrimination reporting, and employee protection. Federal oversight for 5 years. And a fund substantial, permanent, and named after James Daniels for wrongful conviction victims and families affected by medical misconduct. Marcus sat in Patricia's office as she explained the details. The James Daniels Justice Fund will be endowed with $15 million, she said. It will provide legal assistance to victims of medical negligence and support families seeking accountability for institutional failures. Your father's name will be permanently associated with justice. Marcus stared at the document. His father's name printed in formal legal language, attached to something real and lasting and good. He never wanted recognition, Marcus said quietly. He just wanted to tell the truth. And now he has. 30 years late, but his truth is part of the public record. His story is part of history. Everything Thornton tried to bury is out in the light. It doesn't bring him back. No. But it means something. To you, to Eleanor, to everyone who comes after. Patricia paused. Your father's sacrifice wasn't meaningless, Marcus. It took 30 years, but it wasn't meaningless. Marcus signed the settlement agreement with hands that trembled only slightly. The hospital transformation happened faster than anyone expected. Within 6 months, St. Michael's had a new chief administrator. A black woman named Dr. Patricia Howard, recruited from Johns Hopkins, known for her commitment to transparency and patient advocacy. She implemented sweeping changes, new hiring practices, new complaint procedures, new protections for whistleblowers. Roy Hendricks's entire security team was replaced. The new security director was a former FBI agent with a specialty in civil rights enforcement. He implemented mandatory bias training body cameras and independent oversight of all security interactions. Room B12 was emptied. Every file was cataloged, digitized, and made available to investigators. The secrets that had been hidden for 30 years became evidence in ongoing investigations, the foundation for policy reforms, the raw material for understanding how institutions fail. And Marcus Daniels was offered the position of chief medical officer. He turned it down. "I'm a surgeon," he told the board. "I save lives in the operating room. That's where I belong." But he did accept a seat on the newly formed Ethics Committee, a body with real power, real independence, and a mandate to ensure that what had happened under Thornton could never happen again. Amelia came home in the spring. She was 15 now, taller than Marcus remembered, with her mother's fierce eyes and her grandmother's stubborn chin. The months in hiding had changed. Her made her quieter, more watchful, but also somehow stronger. Their first night back together, Marcus made her favorite dinner pasta with his mother's recipe sauce, and they sat at the kitchen table talking for hours about everything that had happened. About the trial, the verdict, the settlement. About what it had cost them and what it had meant. "Dad," Amelia said finally, "are you glad you did it? All of it?"